A heartfelt and emotionally charged plea has been made to the GCHQ and MI6 in the UK, as well as the BND in Germany, the DGSE in France, the ASIS in Australia, and even the GRU in Russia. What's the plea? Well, a man by the name of Kieth Olbermann has requested that the President of the United States be removed from office by direct or indirect resolution by these intelligence agencies. Can you say treason?
I say, Mum, could you put the telly on? The old blowhard is coming on. You know, that American fellow Mike Spears.
Before I get into all this, I want to tell you about my friends. Now, starting Wednesday, July 5th, my friend John Gibson, who has a radio show right now on Fox Radio actually, but he's going to be moving to the Genesis Communications Network. Now, that's going to be on Channel 5, and he'll be broadcasting live to various affiliate stations across the country and streaming over the internet worldwide. Now, he's leaving Fox because there's been some changes there, and Fox has two new radio shows coming online this week, actually. So John is a good conservative talk show host. John Gibson, I think you'll like him. Give him a listen. I've listened to John for years. Just a great guy. He's going to be on 12 to 3 p.m. Eastern. So I know if you're listening to Rush Limbaugh, you either want to wait and pick up the podcast of John or the podcast of Rush, so that you get to listen to them both. Now, also, Tom Sullivan, who is the business news anchor for, he's in the Fox Business Network. Now, he currently is hosting a syndicated radio talk show on Fox. That's on the radio network. But he's leaving Fox as well, and you can hear him on the Tom Sullivan Show by going to tomsullivan.com, and he'll be up and running Monday, I guess it is. Yeah, Monday. He's a great guy. He's been on the air for years and years. I've listened to him, and John Gibson, of course, forever. Great guys. I hope you'll tune into their shows and check them out. Well, good evening, folks, and welcome to the Spearsy Spin. So, what is the United States Code for treason? Well, one of the folks, believe it or not, up there at the Cornell Law School was nice enough to get this information to me. It is in the United States Code, Title 18, Part 1, Chapter 115, Subscript 2385. Now, this particular code and chapter and title deals with the advocating the overthrow of the United States government. And I'll read you just the precursor here. Whoever knowingly or willfully advocates, abets, advises, or teaches the duty, necessity, desirability, or propriety of overthrowing or destroying the government of the United States, or the government of any state, territory, district, or possession thereof, or the government of any political subdivision therein, by force or violence, or by the assassination of any officer or any such government, or whoever organizes or helps or attempts to organize any society, group, or assembly of persons who teach, advocate, or encourage the overthrow or destruction of any such government by force or violence, or becomes or is a member of, or affiliates with, any such known society, group, or assembly of persons, knowing the purposes thereof. They'll be fined, it doesn't say how much, but I'm sure it's quite a bit, or imprisoned, or both. The prison term is for 20 years. So, here we are. We have Kieth Olbermann. Now, he's a former MSNBC man. He's decided that it is up to him to come to the aid of the Michael Moores, the Rosie O'Donnells, the Alec Baldwins, and about 90% of Hollywood, California elites. You see, Mr. Olbermann has approached via written, video, and recorded message a plea to foreign intelligence agencies for their immediate help with regard to the removal of the President of the United States, Donald Trump. Now, we're going to have to take a break here, but when we come back, you will hear what I call unbridled insanity. And at the end of my commentary this evening, we are going to leave you with the, what do I want to call this? Well, we'll leave you with the audio of Kieth Olbermann committing treason against the United States of America. And no, this is not an actor. It's not made up. But I assure you it's real, and I assure you that all the legal minds I've spoke to thus far believe this to be treason.
One thing you'll see in every society in the globe is music. It's part of what it means to be a human being. You watch these kids, you can just sense this incredible joy and feeling of accomplishment. You just can't imagine that school was at one time silent without any music.
When I sing, it makes me feel happy.
Every trouble I have, it just brushes away.
Music lets me express myself.
My life would be really boring without music.
It's like, wow, we did that?
In New York City, more than half the schools don't have music at all. And I think this is one of the great tragedies in the past decade is that it's been going down. Now we're starting to go up. And thanks to education through music, they're really reversing this. And it's the most important thing we could be doing in education right now is making sure that there's music in these schools. That it costs just $150 per kid for a whole year is like the best money one could ever spend. It's changing these kids' lives and making them better people. It's going to make our city a better place.
He says in his recorded plea, and I'm paraphrasing, as you will hear his 7-minute diatribe against the president at the end of our commentary here, that basically he says, to the governments of all the free world, we have been taken over and are victims of a coup, taken over by moral cynic who is essentially a madman. In his plea to the GCHQ and MI6 in the UK and the BND in Germany, along with the DGSE in France and the ASIS in Australia, and even the GRU in Russia, Mr. Olbermann asked for their help to find and disclose any information that would take Donald Trump out of office. Now, who is Kieth Olbermann? Well, he's an American sports and political commentator. Currently, he is the host of GQ's political web show, The Resistance, with Kieth Olbermann. Now, the 58-year-old news broadcaster was with MSNBC for a while, about 8 years, before he was summarily let go. Olbermann also anchored a show called Countdown with Kieth Olbermann. Olbermann was actually educated at Cornell, and he has worked with Al Gore before the Al Gore network was sold to Al Jazeera for an estimated $500 million. Wait, a former Democratic vice president sold a television news business to people associated with terror groups? You betcha. Anyway, Olbermann parted ways with MSNBC, where he spent 8 years launching the network into a progressive alternative to Fox News. But trouble and quiet whisperings always seemed to follow poor Mr. Olbermann. In one instance, he'd been suspended for donating money to 3 Democratic candidates for Congress. And you can't do that when you are in the news business. So actually, this was the deciding factor to cease his tenure at MSNBC. That's the way we understand it. Now, it appears as though Olbermann suffered difficulties both, as an employee and as a boss. Now, these rumors gained further credence with a recent release of an oral history of ESPN. Many of Olbermann's former colleagues describe him as brilliant but insufferable. One anchor went on record saying, "We felt so much relief when Kieth left as unrestrained joy." Olbermann is and has been consumed with his return to cable television. He just can't live without it. Now, he's had contributors helping him along the way, such as Michael Moore, the Rolling Stones' Matt Taibbi, and even comedian Richard Lewis, along with PBS's documentarian Ken Burns. Meanwhile, former colleagues like Rachel Maddow have always believed that Kieth Olbermann would not only make a comeback, but might be bigger than MSNBC. With regard to Olbermann's assumed firing from MSNBC, he has said, quote, "They thought I was going to go away for so long that nobody would bring me back," end quote. Olbermann then alludes to the stupidity of his enemies, whoever they are. Al Gore and the show. No one is really certain what the show really was about, I don't think. I don't even have any information here about it. And when I contacted the mighty, powerful Wizard of Oz way down there in sunny California, they had nothing either. So, but I believe it was a remake of the Countdown show with Kieth Olbermann is what I think it was. But, things changed at MSNBC for Olbermann when Tim Russert died. Now, Tim Russert, even though he was on the other side of things, I had great respect for him, and I thought he was an excellent broadcaster, and I thought he was an excellent interviewer. Sadly, he passed away. One of the reasons... one of the things Olbermann said that one of the reasons that he got as far as he did was that Tim Russert was always there to run interference for him. So that was a good thing, and it sounds like something Tim Russert would do. So now we have the troubled Mr. Olbermann committing open treason on the air. He claims that the U.S. citizens are no longer in charge of the government and that Trump and company have made Washington into a pseudo-Chicago of sorts, reminiscent of the Al Capone days. At least, I think that's what he's talking about. I think that's what he means. Now, Olbermann is concerned about the CIA now being run by one of President Trump's appointees. Now, it's odd because I always thought it was up to the president to appoint leaders of the CIA and such. What do I know? Along with that thinking, he considers Mike Flynn, who of course was the former National Security Advisor, to have been a Russian spy or possibly just a stooge. Mr. Olbermann also alludes to the fact that the United States government is now in the hands of useless amateurs. And oddly enough, these sentiments appear to have been echoed about Olbermann during his tenure at MSNBC. Apparently, Mr. Olbermann must possess an amount of education with regard to psychology, as he alludes to a mental condition President Trump may have known as Trump's brain doesn't work properly. I guess I was absent on the day they entered that type of diagnosis into the American Psychiatric Association's list of mental afflictions. Mr. Olbermann claims that President Trump was elected only because of the United States' negligence and stupidity, plus the greed of the elite class. Of course, he also claims that the United States Senate and Congress have been silenced by a power that exceeds anything imaginable, man. Along with this line of thinking, he also feels that we are in a constitutional crisis. Kieth Olbermann is hoping that the foreign powers that he has poured his heart out to will somehow bring forth some type of damning evidence that can be used against Mr. Trump, or as Mr. Olbermann refers to him as, the dictator in training. Now, a scary admission of thought by Mr. Olbermann was heard by folks like myself who are trained to hear unspoken but referenced ideology that the FBI, the CIA, and the Justice Department have a clear mission concerning President Trump. Now, this is according to Mr. Olbermann. And once I heard that, I, for one, would subscribe to the belief that Mr. Olbermann inherently believes that the president should be a target of these same agencies. And to me, that's quite troubling. Now, Mr. Olbermann admits that the media, along with those left-leaning fascists, have done all they could do to prevent Donald Trump from becoming president. Now, in his final plea, he asks that all intelligence agencies, both foreign and domestic, help to do something to get Trump out of office. He even gave a shout out to the PSIA in Japan. Okay, well, now it's time for you to listen to 7 minutes and 22 seconds of an individual that most likely has put the rope of treason around his own neck. You will not believe what you're going to hear. At any rate, here's the clip, and we'll see everybody on Monday.
I'm Kieth Olbermann, and this is The Resistance. I appeal to the intelligence agencies and the governments of what is left of the free world, to them as entities, entireties, as bureaucracies making official decisions, and to the individuals who make decisions of conscience, to GCHQ and MI6 in the UK, to the BND in Germany, the DGSE in France, the ASIS in Australia, and even to the GRU in Russia, where they must already be profoundly aware that they have not merely helped put an amoral cynic in power here, but an uncontrollable one, whose madness is genuine and whose usefulness, even to them, is at an end. To all of them and to the world's journalists, I make this plea. We, the citizens of the United States of America, are the victims of a coup. We need your leaks, your information, your intelligence, your recordings, your videos, your conscience. The civilian government and the military of the United States are no longer in the hands of the people, nor in the control of any responsible individuals on whom you can rely. The first step towards compromising our FBI occurred Tuesday with the unilateral firing of its director by the president, prompted by the Attorney General, both of whom are, or were at least in theory possibly to be, under investigation by the FBI as led by that director they fired. Our CIA is run by one of that president's political appointees. The first national security advisor was fired and may have been a Russian stooge. The second national security advisor has reportedly been yelled at by the president because he had had the temerity to disagree with him. Our State Department is in the hands of useless amateurs. Our United Nations mission is bereft of power and uninformed. And the White House is run by a cabal of an amoral family syndicate that has spent its first 3 months slapping a dollar sign on anything that stood still long enough. A cabal with, at its head, a man with seemingly no interest in our laws, in our rights, in our Constitution, and with a brain that appears to not work properly. Through our own negligence, the resentments and stupidities of millions of us, and the boundless greed of our elite class, our democracy has all but slipped away from us. It hangs today by a thread, and those who could protect it and restore it and fight for it, even at this late date, the Republican politicians whose voices today could force Trump out of office tomorrow, they are almost silent, owned by special interests and silenced by a power that exceeds even whatever dedication to freedom they once had. All but a few of them fall back into platitudes about the leader of the country firing the head of the FBI and precipitating a constitutional crisis in order to shut down the investigation of his possible high crimes and misdemeanors. Our majority party impotently wrings its hands about timing and how troubled they are, and then they go back to calculating how they will most easily get reelected, with whose money By whose instructions? We, the citizens of the United States of America, are victims of a coup. For months, we have heard that your organizations have damning evidence against Donald John Trump. Whatever evidence you may have, you cannot conceal it any longer. Whatever we in this country are to you now, wherever you are now, you know that this nation has been a savior to you at some point in the past, and that our stability and our freedom and a government controlling this country that is at least sane is your surest guarantee of a prosperous future. Indeed, perhaps your surest guarantee of any future at all. Now we need your help. Whatever there is on Trump, reveal it. Issue it officially if you can, leak it if you cannot. If your directors and your governments want you to wait, look to the last days here and ask yourselves, plumb your consciences, if there is any time left to wait. Give it to a reporter. Give it to an American friend. Put it on the internet. Leave it outside somebody's back door. There is no time left for protocols and estimations of long-term impacts and tradecraft. A dictator in training has betrayed our Constitution and nevertheless survived 2 nights in office. The dictatorship he may want, the dictatorship he may feel is the natural extension of his past life, the dictatorship he may believe he has earned, has gone in this week from crawling to taking its first few tentative steps. What you have, we need, and we need it now. And to the intelligence community of this country, your patriotic duty is clear. In many respects, in the months since the election, you have provided your greatest service in our history. A democracy that has lost its political way, staggers down the street like a drunk, and lurches towards the gutter, yet you have walked a virtually bipartisan straight line, and you have followed your rules, and you have followed the rules of the civilians. And yet, the evildoers still exist regardless. The greatest threat to the freedoms of this nation that this nation has ever faced, the Trump administration, the Trump junta, is playing by no rules. They just offed the FBI director and let him find out about it by reading a TV news crawl in the back of the room in which he was addressing his Los Angeles office. They have no rules. For now, the rest of us who only want our democracy back, we can have no rules either. We will take the risk of reestablishing the rules later on. What you in the FBI, in the CIA, in the Justice Department have on Trump, we also need now. Because by tomorrow, it may disappear, and your ability to do anything with it may disappear as well. Some of us here on the outside have tried the best we could to prevent this day, others less so. Right now, it doesn't matter who did much when. You in the FBI, CIA, the other intelligence agencies, the Justice Department, you must be the patriots now. You in the Five Eyes, in the PSIA in Japan, in the outfits around the world, too secret to have their names known to us. You must become, for the moment, Americans. We need what you have, and we need it now, and we need it made public. It is more than just the fate of this sloppy but well-meaning country that is at risk. For all of our faults, for good or bad, we cannot be left as a fascist rogue state and an enemy of freedom and international comity. The fate of all freedoms may rest in your hands and your willingness to not merely hint, but show what you know. If we go under, you are next. The freedom you save will be your own. Resist. Peace.